Okay, hello, and I think it's time to begin, so please welcome you, because I'm here all the time and doing stuff. I'm Paweł Spychalski, this is the FPV University, this is the Saturday evening live stream, and today we're gonna talk about the remote ID. Why am I... is beeping. In general, we're gonna talk about what is a remote ID, how more or less remote ID is supposed to work. Do we need remote ID? And how remote ID will fail, but it all depends on how we gonna, what's the definition of the success for the remote ID. And also, most importantly, on, what will be the repercussions of the remote ID so far in the United States, because especially the European market is not really there yet. It might be soon. Probably everyone and the European regulators are looking how this thing is going to evolve in the United States. So we might get into the remote ID situation, because I'm from Europe, for example, in the recent years, probably. And why? Well, it's stupid. Not because the remote ID is stupid, but the remote ID is stupid because it will not work. It will fail. It will fail to reach the main goal of the remote ID, but we're gonna talk about this in a short moment. I see that people are slowly joining, so that's actually fantastic. We already have 12 people in the chat. I hope that more will come later, but don't you worry, I'm gonna record most probably the whole segment about the remote ID locally, and then try to create a separate video on this topic, because this is, let's be honest, this is a huge thing. This changes a lot, but not as much as people actually think. And so it's I think it's a good thing to have something like a nice discussion on the topic, and to propagate the knowledge on, for example, why ExpressLRS Radar is not really solving the remote ID problem. But I know that some people think that ExpressLRS Radar will solve the problem. And by the way, if you don't know what the ExpressLRS Radar is, then you should get yourself familiar, but don't you worry, we're going to talk about ExpressLRS Radar today as well. But let's begin with something more pleasurable than the remote ID. Kozel, amazing beer. I love those bad boys. It's a black beer from Czech Republic. I was never really that much into the dark beers. Actually, I was not really into the beers as well, besides the Weiss beer. But this year I discovered this bad boy, and oh man, this thing is amazing. So I'm gonna have one. And well, you can only envy me, because this thing is just fantastic. So cheers. And also, there will be a small update, personal update, not really personal, but let's say a small update about the biggest project I'm currently running. And this is, of course, the project that some of you might already know, project of me building a house and a studio that will replace this attic over here. There's our bed, we sleep over there, there's my 3D printed, there are stairs, there's the wardrobe, so everything is super cramped and actually sucks a lot. Your favorite topic, beer, Jeff, or building a house? That's something interesting. By the way, I see only 8 people like this stream already, but we have 21 people watching, so you know what to do. Hit the like button. Let's invite more. And while we are still waiting for people to join, beer. So one more time, cheers. It's bloody hot today, so cold beer in the evening is actually a pretty cool thing. Let's begin with the topic of me bragging about how my biggest project so far is progressing. I'm slowly becoming an expert, by the way, in this whole construction crap. I already more or less know, for example, how to lay the foundation. So this is basically what happened 2 days ago. As you can see, they are pouring concrete into the foundation. So that's something. and hopefully in the next 2 months I'm gonna have a roof that it's not ready to move in yet, because I have no idea how I'm gonna do all the installations and the heating and the electricity and well, you know, everything that's connected. But yeah, at least I'm gonna have roof, and I will have a lot of things to do. I'm already learning, teaching myself on how to make electrical installation in the house. Turns out it's not that hard. And when I try to check how much I would have to pay for the electrical setup in this thing, something around $10,000, more or less. I think I can do it for like fraction of this thing, because all the tools will cost me like $500 for all the tools I need to make the electrical layout over there, and most probably also like, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 for all the supplies. So it's not that expensive, and I'm gonna save a lot of cash that I can then spend on other things. So that's that. It's running, and wish me luck, because I'm gonna bloody hell need a lot of luck. Then $20 per hour. Well, man, I still have like 17 days of the vacation left, because I'm not taking any vacation this summer. I'm saving for like November. So in the whole November, I'm taking November off, and I will be doing electrical setup in this thing. Oh, that's gonna be interesting. $20 per hour. Man, I earn more than $20 an hour, so maybe there's something to it. Anyhow, that was this unofficial me bragging about crap part. I think it's slowly time to move into the RemoteID elements. But before that, there is something I want you to be aware of. This is partially connected to the RemoteID, but not really RemoteID. If you have the ExpressLRS that is based on the ESP or ESP32 or ESP82 something boards, then there is a work in progress in the ExpressLRS project that kinda makes ExpressLRS compliant. Kinda, this is very important. I'm gonna talk about this slightly later. Kinda makes it compliant with the RemoteID United States FAA demand regulations. So this thing works. It's supposed to be working in the Wi-Fi beacon mode. It's transmitting all the required data, like the pilot ID, position and time, and etc., etc., etc. And based on the Captain Bry check of the specification of the RemoteID compliant device, this meets the RemoteID compliant requirements. However, there is a catch, and the catch is that it's not really working like that. If you really dig slightly deeper into the specification of what kind of requirements have to be met over there, then there's a problem. It's a big problem, and but we're gonna. By the way, this is the legal problem, not really a technical problem. But we're gonna talk about this slightly later. Also, as you can see, there is quite a lot of things to be still done. So it's absolutely not ready yet to be used by anyone, but kinda well has a lot of potential, and I really would like to see where this thing will lead us. And if you ask me, I have nothing against actually making my hands dirty by helping Captain Bry with implementing this thing, because it might be actually quite a nice thing to have everywhere. And as you can see, I'm even like kind of participating over there. So everyone who's into the topic, please remember that the ExpressLRS Radar project is actually over there. So let me quickly pull this thing into the chat and quickly post a link. So you might add this pull request to your observed list because you might need it. And also something else. Who remembers INAV Radar? some times ago, and it's still there. There was a project called the INAV Radar that kind of was amazing. If you were flying with the buddies, you could in INAV you could display where your buddies, flying buddies, are. Have a nice feature connected with INAV Radar. This kind of works like a RemoteID to some extent, of course not fully, but what's also kind of cool that INAV Radar is kind of moving outside of the INAV. And by the way, this is good for the project because now they are called FormationFlight and FormationFlight GitHub, not Formation Flying, man, FormationFlight. Now I cannot find it. FormationFlight. Yes. Here's the FormationFlight. And with the FormationFlight, the guys, basically the same set of guys that build the INAV Radar, are trying to make it slightly more versatile and also hopefully pull the features that are required to run the FormationFlight into the Betaflight project. Because of course the flight controller you use has to be aware of the additional data that's sent from the INAV Radar to be able to display everything on your OSD and more or less to be able to use all the features that come from the FormationFlight. By the way, I have even a whole video on how to set up INAV Radar in INAV, so you might take a look at it. And I think that's another project that's worth keeping your eyes on because there might be interesting things coming from this, especially that FormationFlight will support the ExpressLRS hardware, which is amazing because you can have one ExpressLRS receiver to like drive everything, and then you can have a second ExpressLRS receiver flashed with the FormationFlight that is used for the coordination between other devices in the air. And that's super cool because with the INAV Radar, like flashing those big ESP32, I don't have anything. Oh, I have something like here. This basically the size of the board, more or less the size of your thumb, somewhere in your drone, was always kind of problematic. With ExpressLRS hardware, it's like, come on, it's amazing. Just purely amazing idea on how to retrofit already available hardware to do some completely different functions. So, yeah. So that's that. Now, I already asked on my chat, what do you, as my publicity, think about the RemoteID, especially in the context, will the RemoteID kill the RC hobby or really not so much? And 28% of you are staying in the position that the RemoteID will kill the RC hobby. FPV, or let's be honest, FPV hobby. 41% of you says that no, it will not kill the FPV hobby. 21% has no idea what will be the outcome of them, and 10% do not care. And this is interesting because if you ask me, I also do not care about the RemoteID as much as one might imagine. I know that there is a lot of people out there in the hobby, especially in the YouTubes and everywhere, that think that RemoteID is very bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but also, honestly, this is my unpopular opinion. This is not as bad of the thing as many people actually think, and I think it will be fine. Honestly, guys, it will be fine. You still will be able to fly. Government will not try to catch you. Okay, they might, but they will fail, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it will be fine. However, let's begin with the major things, and let's begin from the start. What is the RemoteID? The RemoteID is something that basically is happening right now in the United States and is the attempt of the FAA, Federal Aviation Agency, to enforce so that all the drones, but as the drones we have to understand all the unmanned aviation vehicles, so drones, airplanes, FPV, no FPV, everything that flies autonomously, including even, let's be honest, toys, above certain limits, to broadcast certain data using the radio frequencies, public radio frequencies. So Based on the basic specification, each of those devices has to broadcast the pilot ID, device ID, has to broadcast time, has to broadcast the position, course, altitude. It has to broadcast since takeoff until landing, and plus some additional elements here and there to, how the authorities say it, increase safety. Now, this is very important to understand that this is not a brand new idea, because if you take a look at the broader scope of what the remote ID is, it's exactly the same as the transponder beacons used everywhere on the airplanes, on the ships, well, basically everywhere, only on the smaller scale. Because, well, when years ago transponder beacons were introduced into the airplanes, the manned airplanes, this also was kind of on the safety concerns, because, well, you do not want two airplanes to crash together in the air, and as the result, you have a lot of people dead, and nothing really good comes out of that. So, if we extrapolate the assumptions of the transponders into the modern hobby, we might come, or at least the FAA came into the conclusion that this is exactly the same. It's not. We're gonna come to the problem why it's not exactly the same in the moment, but on some level it's exactly the same. Every craft that is flying, it's autonomously, well, radio-controlled flying, has to broadcast who's flying, from where it's flying in some cases, and also its position, course, speed, altitude, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then everything is great, fantastic, because when we have this thing, everybody will be safe, no harm will be done, and bad people will not use drones to do malicious things. Okie dokie. Let's say that that's the reality. It's not, but we're gonna come to that in a slight moment. And of course, because this is happening on the public frequencies, there are applications that you can install on your smartphone, and because this is Wi-Fi beacon mode, then you will be able to pick everybody who's flying around you with your smartphone, so you know what's going on and who's flying and where it's flying, and nothing bad will happen because airplanes will not hit drones anymore. Well, not that the big airplanes ever hit any drones. Well, some did, but nothing bad happened yet. And that is, in theory, the story behind the remote ID. And now, if we already covered on how it's supposed to work, let me ask you one more time. Rozpocznij ankietę. Will it work? Let's slowly start to think. Will let's try to think on why the remote ID in this configuration, in this setup, actually makes absolutely no bloody sense. And why it will be basically a dead low, it will not increase of safety of anything, and it will be just a waste of money and resources, and break the not so great relationship between the FAA and the FPV pilots in the United States. Let's begin with technical aspects of why the remote ID will fail. How it's implemented, how it's designed, and how it's supposed to broadcast the data that is supposed to be in the beacon makes it basically unusable. Because the biggest difference between those huge transponders used on the airplanes and boats and everywhere, manned airplanes and boats and everywhere, and those teeny tiny remote ID beacons, pseudo beacons, is the problem of range. The range of such a device In theory, if you look at the specification of how much of the range the Wi-Fi beacon technology offers you, they say it's 3 to 5 times the range of the standard network. How far do you get a good reception of your Wi-Fi network? Let's say 30, 40, 50, 100 meters. Even if we will be very optimistic and multiply this by 4, we get the practical maximum range of the RemoteID to something like 500 meters. And how much time do you have as the pilot of the manned aircraft, when you assuming, of course, that you have the hardware that is capable of detecting the drones in the close proximity, if you get the information that there's a drone 500 meters from you? How much of the time and the possibility to do any kind of react to actually implement in flight? The answer is absolutely bloody zero. Then, because right now, apparently, there is only a need for the pilots to implement the transmission and maybe later to upload some logs here and there. Nobody is really talking about who will be detecting this thing. How to gather data, what will be, if there will be a central system to live track all the drones in the everywhere, basically everywhere in the United States, to be able to protect yourself from the drones wanting to do something bad. And if there is not such a system, then please explain me how the fact that the drone is transmitting the RemoteID will actually increase the safety of anything. The only scenarios I can really think of are the scenarios when the DJI pilots will be detected when they will try to make photos in the places when they are not supposed to make any photos and record videos. So the only way that the RemoteID actually can impact and increase the safety to some extent is when the pilot is using the off-the-shelf DJI commercial drone. Because then it's absolutely fully possible that some authorities over something will have the hardware that can detect such a thing. And I don't know, like Washington, White House, there's a detection, and because the DJI drone will be actually, you will not be able to turn this off, will be transmitting your position. Everybody will know, oh, there's a rogue drone close to the White House, so we have to react. Then okay, I can understand that this in some extent is increasing the safety. Okay, the DJI pilot is flying on the LaGuardia airport. Absolutely, I can imagine that this will to some extent increase the safety. Like some time ago, last year, we had a huge thing in Poland when somebody was flying his Inspire or something like that close to the path to the airport in Warsaw. And it was really like close. Yes, super close. Because the pilots actually saw this thing. So it was a thing. On the other hand, also, I think this year or the last year, we had a situation that some pilots on the Polish airport in Warsaw also saw a huge orange drone, huge, like 2 meters wingspan. And most probably it was a guy flying his glider. But it was a drone. Of course it was a drone. Anyhow, so in those two cases, I actually can imagine how the RemoteID can help to improve some kind of the safety, like smuggling drugs and weapons into the places when they should not be, like the prisons, military bases. Okay, using DJI, this is very important, drones for bombing attempts of something here and there. Okay, I get it. But what the RFID specification, not RFID, what the RemoteID specification and the whole attempt is not really solving in terms of making this a success, is that it's not really guaranteed guaranteeing anything like that for everybody else. Because there are two categories. Like when you have the commercial drone both, then it has to have the remote ID. You cannot take off without the remote ID. It has to run the self-test of everything and like check everything, and you have to land when the remote ID is down. So it's fully automated. It just works. It just transmits your position into the air. On the other hand, we have the DJI logs, so it's not really that. It's not really there, and such. But FAA decided to go one step further and also enforce usage of the remote ID module transmitters on the ready-made, not the ready-made, or the customer-made drones. So if you did any kind of the assembly of the drone or the airplane, you have to put the remote ID transmitter on your thing. But what this part kind of forgets to mention is that you cannot expect that a person that wants to do something bad with the drone will actually install the remote ID module, because there is no way for anyone to block possibility to arm and fly and perform every single function over there without this thing inserted, running, operational, configured, and up the way. If there is a smuggler, a mob, a criminal, or anyone, a terrorist, whatever, that's not really important of how we're gonna call this thing out there, and he will want to use the drone to bring havoc on anything. Just look basically what's happening in the Ukraine. There is not a single chance, and you will install the remote ID transmitter on this drone. No, it will absolutely not happen. There's not a chance. And because the FAA cannot prohibit the takeoff of such a drone without the remote ID module, it's basically becoming absolutely useless. It will not increase the safety in this case of anyone everywhere. The only case of that somebody this thing will be in use is because somebody is flying in the park and Karen, you are flying, you should not be flying, blah, 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 and calls the police. And there's the only basically place when the remote ID system can do something. So that's that. This is why this thing will fail. If you include the fact of the extremely limited range to maximal practical range is 500 meters, 500 yards, quarter of a mile, something like that. But most probably the practical range is closer to 100 meters, so 100 yards, or tenth of the mile, less than a tenth of the mile. Then, well, this thing ain't gonna work, because if you will be able to detect this thing with your smartphone app on your smartphone, then you also see the guy who's flying. So why the hell to use this thing at all? It just makes absolutely no bloody sense. So on that aspect, it will fail. Of course, we don't know how the FAA measures the success, but if they think that success will be the lack of incidents, well, they will succeed, because there was no harm done by the hobby FPV pilots so far anywhere. So that's why the remote ID as the way to increase the safety will absolutely fail and will not reach this goal. But there's another aspect of the remote ID that I don't think that a lot of people are really talking about. If you make a law, and if you want to enforce the law, you have to be able to enforce the law. That means that you have to have means to enforce it. And FAA has no means to enforce it. The chances of you being caught flying without the remote ID somewhere when there is not that much of the people around, and it's not somewhere in the city, close to people, close to buildings, close to the critical infrastructure or national park or anything like that, are basically exactly zero. not a single chance that you will be caught. Because guess what? Police doesn't give a shit about people flying FPV as long as they are not really doing something that's dangerous and can endanger anyone. This is a myth. Of course, the Karen can call the police. This thing always can happen, and like Karens everywhere. On the other hand, you probably should not fly around Karens. You should have built in the Karen detector. So it turns out that the Karen is the real problem, not the police and not the remote ID. And in my career, like person flying, I met police while flying twice, every single time where they were kind of interested in this thing. Oh, what you doing? Oh, today we are flying too because we are learning to fly our big matrice and so on and so on and so on. So that's that. Besides, assuming that even Karen shows up, like, if, believe it or not, but police has the priority queue. And if you think that Karen calling the police saying that the guy is flying a drone will get the priority response, and like the whole squad car will immediately move in your direction, no, they have more interesting stuff to do than chasing drone pilots. Of course, as long as you're not posing any threat to anyone. Oh, Nerdcopter, hello. Hi, man. By the way, could you please share in the chat if you can, if you have any timelines for the next release of the IMUFlight? I would like to know, because last stream, I was even asked about what if IMUFlight is dead. Well, I proved to everyone that no, IMUFlight is not dead. However, it's not really moving fast enough. And if you have any kind of the, yeah, not all the police is pleasant. Yeah, sure, of course, absolutely, but everywhere around the world, the police has more interesting things than chasing FPV pilots that are flying like nobody knows where. Unless you are flying somewhere when there is something that they should be guarding. So that's a completely different situation. Of course, there are assholes everywhere, but in general, that's how it goes. FAA has not enough of the resources to enforce it. Period. So that's that. However, of course, this is, and as long as you do not do anything stupid, then even more that people who don't want to put the remote ID will not put the remote ID, and most probably none of those will ever get into any kind of the consequences. That's just the reality. On the other hand, there is a few things that people also should be aware when flying without the remote ID. And flying without the remote ID in the United States has some consequences. First of all, it's against the law to fly without the remote ID if you are obligated to fly with remote ID. That means if you will get caught, you might have problems. Penalty of some kind, paying a fine, maybe even in some cases like bigger problems. Who knows? Who knows? Of course, everything depends on how serious the stuff you committed actually is. But, by the way, this is not 440 CL. This is 500. Those glasses are amazing. Half a liter easily. Half a liter is that much. Amazing glasses. I love those glasses. They are purely amazing stuff. So that's that. So we have to assume that the remote ID for the recreational FPV pilots is cannot be enforced. Just like that, period. But there are consequences. And the consequence that people probably do not really realize, besides, of course, the fact that, well, if you get caught, you might face the consequences, is that if you do something stupid, you will be in the consequences. And this is exactly about the case when you had some kind of the insurance and you crashed, hit someone, caused some damage, caused some damage, that in theory is covered by your insurance. Like, I don't know, cinematic flying on the film set, like do something like insurance here and there. You know, those big cine lifters are kind of expensive things, and you kind of do want to have this thing insured. If you fly, if you know, every insurance in the world has somewhere in your contract that they do not cover cases when you broke the law. And because you are flying without the remote ID, you are breaking the law, and you will not be paid from the insurance you have. So in case of any kind of the having to pay someone for the damage you or your equipment cost, you will have to do it from your own pocket because the insurance will not pay. But on the other hand, this is exactly the same situation if you are, for example, flying using the radio link that does not have the FCC approval in the United States, like the ExpressLRS. Every single fucking ExpressLRS is not FCC approved, so it's illegal to use it in the United States. Sorry, you have a problem. So do not crash. Do not crash in this case because, well, that's the thing. So the rule is do not do anything stupid. So how are we doing? So are you following where I'm going with this remote ID drama or not really? I hope you are, because I'm trying to have it really simple. And this is interesting because we have the results of our poll, and I asked, will remote ID work? And the option yes was answered by the 3%. So 3% of the people think that the remote ID will increase the safety in the air. 66% say that no, it will not work. That means it will not increase the safety in the air, and 31% do not know. You're very optimistic in terms saying that you don't know, because no, it will not work. Anyhow, that's the first part of the whole story. To sum things up, remote ID is there. There is nothing you can do about the remote ID. You will be obligated to have the remote ID on your drone or the airplane or whatever. Have this thing running, and you have to follow the rules, because if not, you are flying against the law, and if you will be caught, you will face the consequences. Most probably you will not be caught, but that's a completely different story. But you have not heard it from me. Do not do anything stupid. Let's start with that. And then cool cat, remote ID might even take flying more dangerous. How? Why? How do you think it might? Why do you think so, man? I would like to hear your opinion. But fly safety, yeah. But there are more problems with the whole remote ID setup and the current view of this. One of the points from the whole FAA remote ID endeavor is that operator must land as soon as practicable if RF remote ID stops broadcasting. But how the operator should know that remote ID stopped broadcasting? Operator has no idea if the remote ID is broadcasting. Operator might only know if the remote ID transmitter thinks that it is broadcasting. That's not really exactly the same. So another stupid assumption over there, because the remote ID module cannot prohibit you. In most of the cases, it will not even tell you that it's not broadcasting, because guess what? Even the remote ID module has no idea that it's not broadcasting. It only thinks that it's broadcasting, and this is absolutely not really the same. And like I said before, in case if you build it yourself, then it will not restrict takeoff. It will not restrict anything. You might do whatever you want. Enabled, power this thing up, not power this thing up, like not even connect, and like you can fly and you do whatever you want with your drone in the air. So it's not really happening at all. Another reason to think about this whole thing as the huge failure that will only cost money, stress, and will not give any positive feedback to the mix. Because honestly, I would not mind if the RC hobby was once again understood as safe and fun hobby again, about this hysteria we had in the media for some time, saying, oh, drones will kill us all. Fuck you. That's the long story short. Would be really nice if we are not considered the bad guys in this whole thing. So that's that. But this is Drone Camps RC. Said that a remote ID will likely not be a thing, honestly. Like I mentioned last year about the FCC and US trackers with CB radios annual fees. The trackers said, fuck that. Yes, exactly. Fuck that. Who cares? Who gives? This is another law that you cannot really enforce. Like a situation in Poland. Though this is beautiful. I will give you an analogy on the Polish market. In theory, in practice, in Poland, there is a tax on your radios and TVs. In theory, this is for the public broadcast service, blah, blah, blah. If you have the TV or a radio, you have to pay a monthly or a yearly fine that goes only to the public TV station in Poland, which is like right now such a bullshit and the propaganda that nobody is really watching that. But the whole thing is set up in the way that you have to register your TV receiver. You have to register. You have to go to the post office and says, I bought a new TV and I want to register this thing and I want to pay. Guess what? Guess who's paying this really? Like, guess who's paying this is abonnement, subscription fee? Old people. I don't think that anyone from the generation born in the 80s or the 70s, when they bought a new TV, even bothered to go to the post office and register this thing. I don't have a TV. If you ask me, I don't have a TV. Fuck you. And the thing is that the post office, which is currently responsible for collecting this thing, has no means of enforcing this thing. They cannot go to anybody's house and ask, do you have a TV you have not registered? They can't. Even if they do, you do not have to let them in. You just say, nope, get lost. The only case when they can really enforce anything on anyone, when you have registered a TV and then stopped paying. Then they might go. Might have sent someone to your house with, "Oh man, but you have registered, you have not paid, so please pay us everything that you were supposed to pay in the last year, 2, 7, whatever." But then, if you never registered a TV or a radio, absolutely stupid, absolutely not working, and absolutely, like I said, stupid for the second time. Tax on your radio. So stupid. With the remote ID, most probably we're gonna have something kind of similar. But let's go back to the topic of the ExpressLRS Radar, the open source remote ID compatible implementation of the remote ID module, the external module that you put on your ready-made drone so that it's compliant with the regulations. In theory, everything looks great because in theory, what Captain Bry from the ExpressLRS project is working on is meeting all the technical regulations and requirements for the RemoteID module. That means if you connect everything correctly and add the telemetry and some additional communication between the ExpressLRS receiver and your flight controller, and of course you have the GPS, etc., 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 the module can, of course, get the actual position from your drone and transmit it over the Wi-Fi beacon with the specific set of the information, and everything is right. So, in theory, you got yourself a RemoteID for free. Wonderful. Wonderful solution. Everything should be happy that we had the ExpressLRS, and the ExpressLRS is solving real problems. Because, yeah, it's kind of solving real problems. However, I have a bad news for anyone who thought that the ExpressLRS Radar will actually solve the RemoteID module problem for your drone. Because, no, it will not solve your problem. Because even if you will put the software from the ExpressLRS on your ExpressLRS receiver that transmits the compliant set of the information over the correct frequency and corrects everything, and the application that is used is really like getting correctly all the data, it's still not RemoteID compliant. Why? Let me get the correct paragraph. There is a FPV-FC.org webpage that has a lot of useful information on this topic. And there is a sentence: registration, no, like $5, whatever, home build, whatever means of compliance. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful. Any person can submit a means of compliance for the design and the production of the standard RemoteID UAS or the RemoteID broadcast module to FAA. That means that anyone can build a drone, or anyone can build the module and can use it, and not can use it, and can manufacture it. Only they have to submit their module to the FAA. You have to send the person, address, email, how you say that you are compliant with the regulation, analysis of the validation procedure, ground test, flight test, how it, like, you have to have a longish document. I can guarantee that the bureaucracy loves this kind of the document, and document at the end would have to be massive, and you have to demonstrate the means of the compliance. That's also beautiful, by the way. You have to demonstrate it. No, nobody knows yet how that you have this thing. And here comes the bad part. The ExpressLRS is not the manufacturer of the RemoteID broadcast module. The ExpressLRS development team, the ExpressLRS team, are not the manufacturers of the RemoteID broadcast module. They will not submit their code to FAA, because the module, the physical module, is the module. And if you bought somewhere the hardware and you flashed the firmware over this hardware, you are the manufacturer of the module. You are responsible for submitting your module to the FAA. So even if you got yourself the ExpressLRS radar compatible hardware, and the manufacturer of this hardware does not submit it as the official RemoteID broadcast module to the FAA, and you flashed it and you put it into your drone, you become the manufacturer. You have to submit it, and even the fact that ExpressLRS or Captain Bryce says that it's transmitting correct data doesn't mean that FAA will recognize it as the official thing. So that's the problem with the ExpressLRS radar. It solves the technical aspect, does not really solve the legal aspect of the thing, because the RemoteID broadcast module becomes a certified device that meets all the requirements for the remote ID only if you submit it to the FAA, and the FAA politely agrees. And the rules of the submit is that there's quite a lot of things that have to happen, and I can guarantee nobody who's like flashed something will ever do it, because that's just stupid. Radiomaster will not do it, and by the way, it's not that simple, because if you submit such a thing, then you take a lot of responsibility. And I can guarantee that Radiomaster will not be interested. At least, does anybody even check if the Radiomaster has the FCC approval on their receivers? I have a Radiomaster like box over here. EG6GV. I don't see an FCC. No, there is the FCC. Sorry, my bad. There is the FCC mark. So this thing is compliant with the FCC. That's nice. Or they say it's FCC compliant. But is this thing really an FCC logo? FCC logo. How does the FCC? No, they put the FCC logo, so they say that this is compliant. They even have the China export mark. So, okay, Radiomaster is actually kind of cool company. Kudos to you, Radiomaster. Because you say that your hardware is FCC compliant. Cool. That's a bold move, if you ask me. Because honestly, I would have a lot of That's the hardware, by the way. I would have a lot of reservations of saying that my product. This is very important. The product is FCC compliant, not the hardware. My product is FCC compliant when anybody can flash any firmware to this that makes this thing immediately not FCC compliant. So, ballsy move, Radiomaster. Cool Cat, yes. Radiomaster is awesome. Yeah. So, in my opinion, that's the situation with the remote ID mess that we have right now in the United States. It has some nice ideas behind it. From the technical point of view, I think it's actually kind of smart. Because usage of the standard Wi-Fi beacon functionality actually simplifies this thing. It makes the manufacturing of the hardware much simpler than you might think it is. However, the problem is that, in my opinion, FCC will fail, and FCC will not meet its biggest goal, at least official goal, to increase the safety in the air, because it's not possible to increase the safety in the air with such a thing. And if anyone will ever be saved thanks to this thing, is only when this will be a DJI pilot flying in the stupid place when he shouldn't, or maybe like a police finding somewhere who's flying next to the LaGuardia with his DJI drone. But besides that, it's the solution. It's not working solution to the problem that is not really that big as it is. And because this solution is not really solving any of the problems that is designed to solve, it will just not work. And on top of that, it's just impossible to enforce this law. It's just impossible, because if you will just fly, nothing will happen. This example. Much more important example. I think what I wanted to show you is the coal. I think this is the name. It's a coal rolling coal. Yeah, something that only Americans can do. It's the practice of modifying diesel engine to emit large amounts of smoke, soot, whatever you're gonna call this. I bet it's not legal. I can guarantee that it's not legal. I can guarantee that even the very loose, laws in the United States say that this is environmental violation, rules violation, and thanks. Yes, people are doing this. You see, this thing even has a web page on the Wikipedia, and people still are doing rolling coal. And ask yourself a question: what's more harmful, rolling coal or flying an FPV drone around the tree doing a flippity floppy? So that's that. Rolling coal is just JH. Yes, the United States seems to be like testbed, and every other aviation agency is currently looking at how this thing gonna work out in the United States. And they will look closely, trying to figure out if this actually is profitable. Because if they will spend a shitload of money trying to do so, and there will be no gain, they will not be able to say, "Oh, it's a huge success. We saved hundreds of lives and millions of dollars in the property." Then, well, there is a problem, because it's not cheap, and it's kind of hard to assume that everything is fine when everything is actually not really fine. So yeah, absolutely, the European, British, Australian, and other flight agencies are looking at the topic, and they will observe. Millions of dollars to control 0.00001 of the population. Yeah, drone cancers. Exactly. That's the situation. Not even control. No, it's not. No, the remote ID is not a control, because to be able to control, you have to be able to enforce it, and you are not capable of enforcing this thing in any way. If European agency will implement remote ID like that, they will not be controlling me, because they cannot control if I install the remote ID on my drone and fly. No, I'm flying in the places when there's no one around. Nobody gives a fuck about that we are flying. And so how they are controlling anything? They cannot shut it down. There's no one in the central or regional center that sees that I'm flying. So it's not really even a control. I would honestly have to say that they are pretending they are in control. I think that's the correct word. They are pretending they are in control, and they are pretending they are doing something useful. You can buy a rifle in America. Yeah, no. But let's be honest. If let's say, like, we are comparing two completely different things. You are still capable of buying the drone in the United States, just like you are able to buy a rifle. Not in every state, if I remember correctly, and have it. But here are regulations, and there are regulations, because if you want to buy a drone in the United States, ready-made DJI, of course, it has to meet the regulations, has the remote ID, etc., etc., etc. On the other hand, if you want to buy a rifle in the United States, the rifle also has to pass some regulations. It's semi-auto. There are rules about the length of the barrel, about the magazine, about the type of the ammo that is used, if this thing can attach some additional accessories, or it's a pistol, it has braces. There's really like a shitload of different rules. And you can buy a rifle or a pistol that only meets this kind of the regulations, just like with the drones. On the other hand, when you are buying a drone, they do not run a background check. And I know it's not really for every state in the United States that there is even a background check. But in theory, in some places, there has to be a background check if you can buy a gun. Or, for example, they completely almost completely prohibit the ownership, not the ownership, the transfer of the machine arms. That's like completely different story. If you want to have something that goes full brrr, then it's problematic, and legally, almost very limited amount of people in the United States have automatic weapons because it's just so complicated. It takes time. If you there's a video from the Forgotten Weapons, Ian McCallum, from like a year or two ago, what you have to do to be an owner of the automatic machine arm in the United States. It's problematic. Honestly, yeah, it's problematic. It can take like half a year, even a year, or maybe even longer to get all the papers done. So there's that. There is no remote ID on the bullet. Yeah, there's no remote ID on the bullet. On the others, like rifle marks, so you can like check. It's like still. The weapons market is slightly more regulated than the drone market. Still, and we cannot say for how long it's gonna be the reality, but still, it's easier to own a drone than to own a gun in the United States. So it's not really that bad. Snuggles, why is INAV not being more proactive like ArduPilot in terms of remote ID? But what do you mean? How the INAV is responsible for the remote ID? Why do you say that INAV should do anything about the remote ID? INAV is not, just like Betaflight, by the way, has nothing to do with the radio transmission. It's just not there. It offers the way to get all the possible information from the flight controller. We offer speed, we offer position, we offer course over ground, and etc., etc., etc. Take it. If you build the hardware, take it. We have interface to get it all. You can use INAV to get this kind of the information. Be happy with it. But INAV does not support any kind of the radio hardware. Why should INAV care about this thing? And let's remember about one more thing. INAV is built by the people in Europe, not in the United States. So we are not really and this is exactly what NetCopten says. No reason remote ID transmission has to or should be part of the flight firmware. Exactly. INAV is the software that flies and nothing else. And we have no intention of make it to do any other functions than just controlling your aircraft. Whatever kind of the regulations out there, they are up to the pilot. We are not providing you with the ready-made drone. We are only providing you with the software for the small part of your drone or the airplane, and that's absolutely all. Nothing more. So that's that. Mike Bergman says, thank you for being honest about it, Pavel. There's a lot of misunderstanding about guns in America. We can leave it at that. Yeah, but, well, says the guy who likes guns as a mechanical devices, but really has no intention of owning one. Because it's so fucking complicated. I could get a gun in Poland. Yeah, it's possible, but it's complicated. I don't want to. I would love to have the guns, but I'm lazy. I don't want to own the guns. So, but that's a completely to do it. Snuggles. The same was said about Crossfire. If you want Crossfire, ask Trappy to do it. Yeah. GMA Visual Jason. Evening, man. Okay. Ian FPV, but has anyone confirmed that Radiomaster module actually is listed somewhere in the FCC website for compliance? I have no bloody idea. Should we check? FCC. On the other hand, is it public? Is it public? FCC catalog Radiomaster. Yeah. Okay, we will not be really looking into this topic. Funny fact. Uh, oh, this is awesome. This is awesome. You're gonna love it. You see this thing over here next to the FCC logo. There are two letters, CE. And if you open the Wikipedia about the CE Europe, is the basically CE is the equivalent of the FCC. It's basically almost the same. If you want your thingy, usually electronic, but not only, be sold in the United Europe, your thingy has to have the CE mark. It just has to. Like, if it doesn't have the CE mark, that means it's not allowed to be sold and used and brought into. Basically, rules are basically almost the same. Like, maybe even less strict than the FCC itself. Because in case of the manufacturer or the importer, you only have to like say that it's CE compliant. Okay, we take the responsibility. If it's not, then we take the responsibility. So to some extent, it's even less restrictive than the FCC. And now let me show you something truly amazing. China export logo. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. And now, on many things, you can have the CE mark. That it means China export has nothing to do with CE mark. And, well, if you bought something, then is it China export or CE? If I see the CE letters on my product, is it really like CE marking or the China export? So that's like bloody hell. This one on this thing looks like the CE. This really looked like a CE, maybe not. Yeah, this is the CE mark on the Radiomaster thing I have over here. The flight controller I have over here, no CE marking, but this is not for sale on the European Union, so that's a completely different story. This thing over here has something that looks like the CE marking, but I bet that a lot of people who bought something from the AliExpress or China in general, just Chinese, see this mark, two letters CE, and they think they are compliant with the European information when this is only a China export. Like, fuck! China export is like, this is how you do this stuff. Oh, XJet, what you missed? Quite a lot of nice things. We were talking about why the RemoteID is a stupid idea and it will fail, including some of the reasons. And also, I don't think that I actually said it. I don't think that the RemoteID is such a big thing. People are afraid. Nah. I don't really care about. Even if this thing will be implemented in Poland, I might get me a module like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? But will it kill the hobby? Nah, I don't think so. Loves, I don't really care, to be honest. It's meh. If it will not be super complicated for me to get the European RemoteID, if this thing will be implemented compliant module, I will most probably get it, and I will not really care too much about that. Like, okay, who cares? I don't. And also, we compared what's the CE and CE, China export versus CE mark, which is the FCC equivalent. Beautiful stuff. Like China is such a magical place. I love China. The different story. Do you know that my father was born in China? I think I told this history once or twice. My family has actually Chinese heritage. The history is kind of interesting. What happened? I'm a Pole. I'm from Poland. And in the beginning of the 20th century, there was no Poland because the Poland back then was divided between Germany, Russia, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And if I remember correctly, the area where my grandfather grew up was under Russian occupation, and like many young Poles, they kind of like a choice, not really a choice, but let's call it a choice. And you will either go to the army or you will build the Far East Railroad. Far east. And I'm even pointing at east. So guess what he chose? East. Of course, because it's and a lot of Poles from that region actually chose exactly this option. As the result, in the city of Harbin in Manchuria, there was the Polish. I don't want to call it a ghetto, but the Polish district where there was a lot of Poles. Thousands. That was really like thousands of people, and they were basically living in Harbin, China, until end of World War II. So they like the Russian occupation, not the Russian occupation, the Russian influence, the Chinese landlord phase, the Japanese occupation of the Manchuria, because that also was the situation. Like my father was born in Harbin, my uncle was born in Harbin, China. My grandfather's brother finishes his doctor studies in Harbin, etc., etc., etc. Nobody is really talking about this, but I think that my grandmother from my father's side was Russian. Somehow nobody is talking about that. I don't know why. But that's a completely different situation. And after World War II, there was a huge repatriation action. So just basically everyone from Harbin, China was packed into the train, like in the cattle wagons, and like, you go Poland, like, see ya, ciao. And a month later, they kind of arrived in Poland, and they settled. Majority of those people from Harbin settled in the city where I live. And not really the Chinese. No, honestly, no. The Chinese and to some extent Russian elements of the culture were present, and to this day are kind of present in my family, especially from my father's side. So some Chinese-inspired cuisine was always in my family. My grandmother, I remember, was making some amazing Russian Chinese stuff for the family get-together. So that's and a lot of Chinese-inspired art on the walls. Now, not so much, but still, it's something like a thing around here. So Harbin, China, amazing place. Okay, guys. It's 9:15 Central European time. And basically, I said some time ago that the live streams will be happening every week now, but they will be shorter. And I think it's time for us to slowly end. I hope I shared enough of the knowledge on the topic of the how it's called, of the remote ID and why it's such a stupid idea. We will not continue with this topic anymore today because I'm tired. I think I will not have another one of those, because tomorrow in the morning I'm going cycling. I will be cycling with my friend, and we will try to reach some places we never were cycling before. So that's something. This is why let's meet one more time next week. Probably next week. Let me quickly check my calendar if I do have anything planned for the next week. No, I don't have anything planned for the next week. So most probably next Saturday, 8 p.m., we're gonna do the live stream one more time about I don't know what yet. But I think the next live streams will be like slightly less Q&A, but more oriented on the specific parts of RC FPV hobby and not only. So I'm putting this thing in, of course, with a catchy title and some kind of the clickbait. But you know, clickbait works. clickbait is amazing, and everybody loves clickbait, at least to some extent. Anyhow, thank you very much for watching. This was the FPV University. I'm Paweł Spechalski. Thank you very much for watching, and like always, happy flying. Damn, I'm doing this thing nicely when I'm after one of those beers. Have a nice evening, guys. Have a nice evening, guys. Ciao.